More than 140,000 people call Torrance home. Bounded by the Pacific Ocean on the west and the city of Carson on the east, its location puts it at the heart of the South Bay. Its stature as the 8th largest city in Los Angeles County hardly qualifies Torrance as a small town. Still, longtime residents often refer to its small town feel.
Small town then and small town now, but in a big context, a small town.
In its infancy a century ago, Torrance truly was a small town. In fact, some referred to it as a bean field. March 16, 1912, the small farm community was officially named after its founder, Jared Sydney Torrance. Torrance's vision for his namesake was to create a modern industrial city.
He looked around to find a good area of land between the harbor and the city of Los Angeles, which he found the Dominguez heirs sitting on Rancho San Pedro, smack dab between San Pedro and Los Angeles. He bought about 3,500 acres originally for around $1.5 million.
But who is Jared Sydney Torrance, and why did this billionaire entrepreneur, originally from a small town in New York, take interest in developing a new city here in California? Finding the answer means learning more about the man, born August 3, 1852, known to his friends as Sidney.
Jared Sydney Torrance came from the small town of Gowanda, New York. His father was a lawyer there. Torrance got his, I would say, character from his father and family. Very hardworking and very entrepreneurial.
Jared Sidney's autobiography paints his father, Cyrenius Chapin Torrance, as a man who believed it wise to cultivate the habit of industry in boys. This meant loading them with responsibilities to teach self-reliance.
The winter following his 6th birthday, I was made to care for and feed a flock of about 100 sheep. On Saturdays, during the same fall and winter, with a brother, a year older than him, he hauled all their firewood from Cattaraugus Indian Reservation, 4 miles away or more. 6 years old.
Sidney demonstrated early entrepreneurial prowess. At 13, he bought and sold a house and lot at a sheriff's sale for $700. He fixed it up and sold it for a profit.
Torrance was buying and selling produce, involved in corporations. He helped found the original bank in Gowanda.
As a boy, he also excelled in penmanship, so he was often sent to his father's law office to copy papers. He could write 100 folios or 10,000 words a day.
His 1883 passport came to light recently, and we can see his signature. And he does have a very precise signature.
A disagreement with his father prompted him to leave home at the young age of 15. He wanted to see the West and took a job as a bookkeeper in Chicago. His work impressed his boss at a wholesale stove firm, but 2 years later, his mother and family urged him to return home to complete his education. He entered Sheffield Scientific School at Yale University in the fall of 1871. He was a popular student and served as president of his class. After graduation, Sidney returned to Gowanda to help tend to his then ailing father's business. He found the work at the firm interesting, but the task of fighting out other people's quarrels distasteful. He happily accepted an opportunity to quit the law and travel and work abroad. He returned home to Gowanda in 1878. While living with his parents, he purchased 1,200 acres of timberland. When a railroad construction boom doubled the price of railroad ties, he made a hefty profit. He also built 30 or more houses in Gowanda. It was his father's ill health that would lead Sidney at age 35 and his family to the Golden State in 1887.
His father did suffer from tuberculosis, and it was the custom of the time to come out to a drier, warmer climate to help with the breathing. And hence, like many people before him, they journeyed out to Los Angeles, to Pasadena, and to environs. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to help his father's tuberculosis, but Torrance and his brother fell in love with Los Angeles.
Sidney and his brother formed a partnership to buy and sell California real estate. His father died 1 year after their arrival at age 62. While Sidney describes his family life as happy, it was wrought with tragedy. Cyrenius and Sidney's mother Mary, pictured here in later years, had 6 children. Only Sidney, his sister Jenny, and younger brother Louis lived to adulthood. Sidney was married in 1889 to Annie Laurie Fowler. They lived in this Pasadena home. She bore him his only children. Jared Sydney Torrance Jr. died before his first birthday. A second son, John Fowler Torrance, died in an elevator accident in Pasadena at the age of 8. Mrs. Torrance died just 4 years later in 1893. But his success in business continued. That same year, Professor Thaddeus S.C. Lowe founded the Mount Lowe Electric Railway to serve a resort Lowe built that catered to the rich on the San Gabriel Mountains. It was a period of financial collapse in Southern California. Creditors, including Sidney, brought suit against Lowe, and in 1897, Sidney became the officer and director of the Pasadena Mount Lowe Railway. He was soon appointed the sole receiver in the bankruptcy case.
He flipped it. He reduced fares. He made the hotel accommodate the average Joe. So floods of picnickers went up there, making quite a handsome profit for him. I think that would be the most successful property he ever flipped.
Sidney lived in this sprawling South Pasadena mansion in 1911 when he began making plans to create a new city. His decision was likely prompted by rising real estate costs in the City of Angels, along with a violent climate in labor management. On October 1st, 1910, a bomb exploded at the non-union Los Angeles Times building. On Christmas Day, another bomb blast in Los Angeles at Llewellyn Iron Works.
So they thought if we moved the factory out to the land, so to speak, it would get the laborers away from the more radical elements, if you will.
Llewellyn Iron Works moved into Torrance in 1916 and employed 500 workers by 1921.
Torrance was the president or director of over 140 corporations. He had stock in P&E, Pacific Electric, Llewellyn, Union Tool, of course, Union Oil. And it's no coincidence that a number of these very same corporations are the ones who originally moved out to the city of Torrance.
Sidney envisioned his city as a worker's paradise.
And this was the time of the City Beautiful movement, a movement to make cities a good place to live. Clean, beautiful, a lot of recreation, fresh air, that sort of thing.
To see his vision to reality, Sidney enlisted the help of noted landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. Olmsted Jr.'s high-profile resume included the National Mall, Jefferson Memorial, and the White House grounds.
Torrance wanted to do things first class, so he got the best he could do, which was Frederick Law Olmsted Jr.
The Olmsted firm was hired to design the new city as a model that would be admired and copied elsewhere. The layout would place factories to the east of the houses and stores, so prevailing winds would carry factory smoke away from the town. There would be paved streets, underground telephone and telegraph wires, 100 or more houses, 6 brick commercial blocks, and a railway passenger depot. Space was reserved for public parks, playgrounds, and a civic center. 300,000 trees were planted, and several acres set aside for public schools.
The idea is to sell a house to the worker. The worker has a stake in the community. He'll work better, he'll commute, and he will raise his family in a wholesome community, making him a better worker and a happier worker.
By 1914, the city was taking shape, but a few of Sidney's well-laid plans weren't working out exactly as he'd envisioned.
A recession hit in 1914. Nobody could afford to buy houses in Torrance. The average worker was at will, meaning that when the factories received less orders, they let go workers. So a worker would much prefer to rent because he didn't know week to week whether he's going to have a job.
It was during this time that Sidney married his second wife, Helena Childs Torrance, in 1914. Childs would become an active partner in seeing through many of Sidney's plans. That included completion of Torrance Memorial Hospital on Ingrassia Avenue 4 years after Sidney's death. The recession didn't stop Sidney's or the city's momentum. In 1917, another major construction project was completed, the city's first high school. As a lover of books, he also convinced his cousin Isabel Henderson to open a library in the front room of her home on Gramercy. He donated 300 books from his personal collection. Henderson would later help found the Torrance Public Library. Jared Sydney Torrance passed away of pneumonia on March 9, 1921. Just 2 months later, citizens voted to incorporate the city of Torrance. This modest gravestone in a Gowanda cemetery marks where his ashes are buried. Few photos were taken of the man throughout his life, but excerpts of a foreword by W. Jarvis Barlow, printed in a book written by Sidney about his family descendants, sums up the man and his character. Barlow founded the Barlow Sanatorium, where Sidney's father was treated for tuberculosis. He remained a lifelong friend.
In any history of the tremendous growth of Los Angeles, his name must always be prominent in financial development, a man whose presence was eagerly sought because it radiated life at its very best. He was a true philanthropist in every way and gave his time, counsel, and financial assistance through all his years among us.
I think Torrance would be very pleased to how the city has developed over the past 100 years.
Colleen Farrell with the Centennial History Minute.